No chance in South Africa there. Julie with a winner right here. Down goes Jackson.
He can basically be called the toughest middleweight puncher of all time. He put his opponents to sleep without any effort, as evidenced by the statistics themselves: 31 fights, 29 knockout victories. But one crazy fight put not only his career, but also his life on the line. Today we will talk about a fight that not only ended in tragedy, but also buried the careers of two fighters at once. And also reveal all the details of the famous fight Gerald McClellan versus Nigel Benn, one of the most terrible fights in middleweight history so far. With respect to boxing fans, not everyone today will remember what McClellan and Benn are famous for. In the 90s of the last century, Gerald was a more famous fighter. The American was always pretentious and spectacular, and his contract with the controversial Don King guaranteed him fame. Thanks to smart promotion from the promoter and huge talent, Gerald was almost ready world-class star.
Who's the best of those out there?
Man, there's so many good fighters now. This is new gentleman from Detroit, Gerald McClellan, I believe his name, McLean. I've seen some tapes of him. It's from highlights, and he seems like a dynamo.
Before the fight with Benn, he had a series of 14 early victories, 10 of which were obtained in the first round.
Julie got a winner right here. Down goes Jackson.
Gerald McClellan.
His first round knockout percentage was even higher than that of Mike Tyson, for which he was called a miniature Mike Tyson.
Light middleweight champion, now all too vulnerable to heavy punching.
Before the fight with Benn, Gerald abandoned the title of world middleweight champion and moved to the second middle division, where he planned to win the championship belt. If he beat Benn, he would probably get a fight with the famous Roy Jones. All in all, Don King wrote a great script. All that was left was to beat Benn.
Most exciting prospect in British boxing at the moment, Nigel Benn. Proxy script. He allowed him there, and he made it.
Nigel Benn was loved by his native British public, but incomparable in terms of potential and popularity with his opponent. Although his record of victories was also impressive. In his first 22 fights, Nigel knocked out every single one of his opponents. It was rumored that in British boxing it was he who was most feared. Before the fight with McClellan, he scored 31 early wins out of 41 fights.
I can become world champion because I'm dedicated, I'm very hungry, and I think, I've got the will to win. I don't want to be second to nobody.
He was a solid, but still a home champion who spent the vast majority of fights at home. Benn, despite his status as an underdog, wasn't about to give up easily. Before the fight, he repeatedly stated that he would not let himself be beaten by an American, and even in front of the British public. So the fight was at least expected to be uncompromising. It was King who insisted that McClellan change his coach. Instead of the experienced Emmanuel Stewart, he began to work with Stan Johnson. All because King needed a person who would strive for results, even if he had to neglect the health of the athlete. Stan Johnson was perfect. However, there were already many questions about the competence of a specialist. Subsequently, claims were made against him, for example, by McClellan's sister Lisa. Gerald was the favorite for the fight, and it had to end in the first round. Nevertheless, as planned, McClellan could not knock out the opponent in the first round. He sent him into a heavy knockdown, so that Benn even fell out of the ring through the ropes.
Ducking very low, Jim, below the waistline, and he looks as though he's done him in the opening round, and we thought this might happen.
This, however, did not stop the Briton. He quickly came to his senses.
Ben has to come back with something.
So he might have just ridden the storm.
Still shaky at the edge. Is it close?
That's it, he survived the round anyway. So all bets off.
Already in the second round, the fight leveled off. The boxers now and then entered the clinch, and after leaving it they exchanged crushing blows. Eyewitnesses noticed that they had never seen a more brutal battle. Boxers desperately beat each other.
Get some power into the punches.
That's some comeback. It looked all over, didn't it?
Another good right hand.
Pee-wee Jim and Doug DeWitt. Well, they said
6 rounds passed in this spirit. The American, who was angry that the fight had dragged on for so long, became visibly nervous and acted chaotically. He missed a few hard shots to the head and paid dearly for it.
Right hand again from his punching.
No, I agree with that. I think
He's looked far better.
oh, what a
Ben's
shot.
just beginning to feel the pace a little bit.
We've seen him come through a few of these in the past.
I'm not surprised. It's been half out for most of the fight. Good left hook. The only slight problem for Ben, his punches are not.
Before the 7th round, he asked the coach to stop the fight. "I don't understand what is happening to me," Gerald complained. Johnson refused to respond to the words of the ward. King would definitely not approve of the surrender of the fight. At the same time, McClellan really got worse.
Some time to recover.
Qualified under the new rules.
Good left hook from Ben.
And they got applause. Can you imagine that? And got a workout.
That was a tremendous left hook from Ben. The fight was the fact that Ben's getting home with good shots, but they're not troubling McClellan.
He's standing up there to oppose Bruno. Who knows? Still not getting out of it. Look at that, Jim.
Well, once again, it's only the sheer heart, courage of Nigel Benn that kept him in the fight. These were the bombs that knocked out
That
Julian.
corner, Jim. He's got to get out of that corner, and he won't. But he doesn't mind being in the corner. That was the own impetus of missing with the
He
fight.
has to call it a
Exactly. Put
knockout.
him back on the point schedule anyway.
McClellan advanced to the 9th round for the first time in his career. By the 9th round, he became lethargic, almost did not attack, every now and then took the mouthguard out of his mouth and blinked frequently. The referee, like the American seconds, did not pay attention to these signs. Ben, at the same time, it seems, fought on adrenaline and only added.
He's got him 2 points in front. Those knockdowns have done that. I tell you what, they could cancel out all the...
With the last of his strength, Ben randomly tried to attack Gerald, and such careless actions led to a violent clash of heads. Someone believes that this was the decisive factor in this fight, but we will never know for sure.
With his head.
Yeah,
Oh, now the crowd will make him fight on.
this is good news for
We'll find out if he's got it.
In the 10th round, Nigel knocked down his opponent twice.
Oh. Well, you saw that punch coming down in 3 rounds.
bad
3
signs here
times.
from McClellan, Reg. He almost swallowed in the previous.
The second time Gerald failed to get up. McClellan was blinking strangely, as if he was having problems with his reflexes and nervous system. However, at the time of the stop, most of the spectators in the hall did not care. Everyone welcomed the end of the crazy fight. The Briton stormily celebrated the victory, the organizers fussed in the square, and no one paid attention to the stretched-out American in the corner, surrounded by his team. King, by the way, was also in no hurry to the client, but was spinning next to the new champion. McClellan lost consciousness and came to his senses, could not see anything and was breathing with difficulty, so he had to put on an oxygen mask. Coach Johnson later said that McClellan repeated, "I feel like Ben is running around in my head." His sinister promoter Don King didn't even think about the fighter, instead he was next to Ben. It was clear that the American urgently needed medical help. He was loaded onto a stretcher and taken by ambulance to the Royal Hospital in Whitechapel. On the way, McClellan, being conscious, asked only, "Was I knocked out? I didn't give up?" In the hospital, the American was removed a hematoma that had formed in the brain, and the boxer spent 11 days in a coma. The reaction to this was mixed. Some pitied McClellan, others, among whom was King, scoffed. "He gave up like a damn dog," the promoter later said. King denied Gerald financial assistance, although he knew that insurance would not cover all the costs. McClellan was another of King's projects, which he abandoned immediately after the failure. Gerald's family even had to borrow money from friends. Ben, on the way to the locker room, by the way, also lost consciousness. Everything worked out, and in the hospital he was diagnosed only with a broken jaw and bruises. They sent him home the next morning. And in the very first conversation with journalists, the Briton cynically declared, "Better him than me." This phrase is still remembered about Ben to this day. The British government has raised the issue of banning boxing in the country. All training centers were under threat of closure. At the same time, an investigation began. Who is to blame for what happened? At first glance, the French referee Alfred Acero, who did not stop the fight in time. It turned out that Acero did not know English, which prevented him from quickly responding to the behavior of the boxers. In addition, he judged only the second fight of this magnitude in his life. The Frenchman categorically denied his guilt. Acero also insisted that McClellan's team should be blamed because Coach Johnson should have thrown the towel in the ring. Johnson justified himself and explained that there was no reason to stop the fight. And in turn, McClellan himself would not have survived the defeat. The fact that the boxer asked to stop the fight, Stan kept silent. And in 2010, he stated that there was evidence that Benn was taking steroids. Their traces, according to the coach, were found in the blood of the Briton, which remained on the boot of his ward. Why it took him 15 years to tell about it is an unanswered question. Johnson stressed that McClellan's opponent was not tested for doping after the fight because he was taken to the hospital due to loss of consciousness. The fainting, he thought, was a sham. Benn, logically, pleaded not guilty. The American is alive, but very bad. The former boxer never got to his feet, still hears poorly and does not see, and still remembers almost nothing. At the same time, his consciousness is quite clear, and he recognizes loved ones. Gerald lives with his sister Lisa, who takes care of him because his children and wife abandoned him. Lisa, in conversations with the press, emphasizes that her brother is having a hard time. He always tells me that he lost everything that night. And I tell him, "No, you won," she says. Helps the former boxer, including financially Roy Jones Jr., with whom Gerald so wanted to meet in the ring. Once rivals began to keep in touch almost immediately after the tragedy. As for Benn, that fight, later recognized as the fight of the year, also broke the world champion. Within 21 months, he had 5 fights and lost 3 times. It turned out that in order to drown out the pain of that tragic evening, Nigel began to abuse alcohol and illegal substances, which, as usual, did not lead to good. There was no talk of pursuing a career. Then there was a suicide attempt. Fortunately, Nigel got out of the deepest depression.